He thought he could throw me away like yesterday's newspaper when he found his precious little side piece. My billionaire husband had no idea that the quiet wife he underestimated was about to become the most powerful woman in the city. This is how I turned his betrayal into my billion-dollar empire. If you've ever felt underestimated or betrayed by someone who should have had your back, this story is for you. Hit that like button if you're ready to see how a woman can rise from the ashes of betrayal and become unstoppable. And don't forget to subscribe because you won't want to miss what happens next. My name is Diamond Washington, and 10 years ago, I thought I was living the perfect life. I was married to Trevor King, one of the most successful tech entrepreneurs in the country. We had the penthouse apartment, the designer clothes, the charity galas where we'd smile for photographers and pretend we were the power couple everyone wanted to be. For 8 years, I played the role of the supportive wife perfectly, managing our social calendar, maintaining relationships with his business partners, and using my marketing background to help grow his company behind the scenes. But you know what they say about perfect lives? They're usually too good to be true. The cracks started showing about 2 years ago. Trevor would come home later and later, claiming he was working on some big deal that required all his attention. He'd take mysterious phone calls and step out of the room, lowering his voice like he was sharing state secrets. His laptop became password protected, and suddenly, he needed privacy for everything. When I'd ask him about his day, he'd give me these vague, dismissive answers that made me feel like I was bothering him with my existence. I tried to convince myself it was just stress from work. Trevor had always been ambitious, always chasing the next big opportunity, but my gut was telling me something different. You know that feeling when you can sense someone pulling away from you, even when they're sitting right next to you? That's exactly what was happening. The man who used to tell me everything was suddenly treating me like a stranger in my own home. The first real red flag came when I was doing laundry and found a receipt in his pants pocket. It was from an expensive jewelry store downtown, and the amount made my heart skip a beat. $15,000 for a diamond bracelet, purchased 3 days earlier. I waited for him to surprise me with it, thinking maybe it was for our anniversary or just because he wanted to spoil me. But days turned into weeks, and no bracelet ever appeared. When I casually mentioned seeing something beautiful in that jewelry store's window, Trevor didn't even blink. He just mumbled something about how expensive things were getting and changed the subject. That's when I started paying closer attention. I noticed charges on our credit cards for restaurants I'd never been to, hotels in cities where he claimed to have business meetings, but somehow never mentioned staying overnight. There were flowers being delivered somewhere that wasn't our home, and gift purchases that never made it to me. Each discovery felt like a small knife to my heart, but I kept hoping I was wrong. I kept hoping there was some reasonable explanation for all of it. The truth hit me like a freight train on a Tuesday evening in March. I had come home early from a meeting with a client, and our doorman mentioned that Trevor had left about an hour earlier with a lovely young lady. My blood ran cold, but I tried to stay calm. Maybe it was a business associate, maybe it was nothing. But something inside me knew I needed to see for myself. I drove to the restaurant where our credit card showed a charge from the night before, and there he was, my husband of 8 years, the man who had promised to love and cherish me, was sitting across from a beautiful young woman with long blonde hair and a smile that could light up a room. She couldn't have been older than 25, and the way Trevor was looking at her made me want to disappear into the floor. He was leaning forward, hanging on her every word, laughing at whatever she was saying, like she was the most fascinating person in the world. It was the same way he used to look at me when we first started dating. I sat in my car for what felt like hours, watching them through the restaurant window. They were holding hands across the table, and when she got up to go to the restroom, Trevor watched her walk away with this satisfied smile on his face. That's when it hit me that this wasn't just a casual affair or a momentary lapse in judgment. This was a full-blown relationship, and I was the fool who had been left in the dark. When Trevor came home that night, I was waiting for him. I didn't beat around the bush or try to trap him with clever questions. I simply asked him who Crystal Lane was, because yes, I had done my research and found out her name from her very public social media accounts, where she posted pictures of expensive gifts and fancy dinners without showing the face of her mysterious benefactor. The look on Trevor's face told me everything I needed to know. He didn't even try to deny it. Instead, he sat down across from me and said the words that would change my life forever. Diamond, we need to talk. I think we've both known for a while that we've grown apart. I've found someone who makes me happy, and I think it's time we both moved on. Just like that. 8 years of marriage, and he was dismissing me like I was an employee he was letting go. But here's where it gets really ugly. Trevor had already been planning his exit strategy long before he got caught. He had been moving money around, hiding assets, and setting up accounts I didn't know about. When he handed me the divorce papers he had already prepared, I realized he was planning to leave me with almost nothing. The settlement he offered was insulting. Enough to rent a decent apartment and survive for maybe a year, while he kept the businesses, the investments, and the life we had built together. He looked me in the eye and said, "Let's keep this simple, Diamond. You sign these papers, take this settlement, and we can both move on with our lives without any drama. I think it's fair, considering you didn't really contribute to building the business anyway." That last part felt like a slap in the face. I had spent years managing his professional relationships, organizing events that brought in major clients, and using my marketing expertise to help grow his company. But apparently none of that mattered because my name wasn't on the official paperwork. That night, after Trevor went to stay at what I assumed was Crystal's apartment, I sat alone in our penthouse and cried harder than I had cried since my mother passed away. But somewhere between the tears and the anger, something shifted inside me. I realized that Trevor had made a massive mistake. He was so focused on his new toy that he had completely overlooked something crucial. I knew his business inside and out. I had relationships with his clients that went back years. I understood his strategies, his weaknesses, and most importantly, I knew where all the bodies were buried. See, Trevor wasn't just successful because he was smart. He was successful because he was willing to cut corners and manipulate people to get what he wanted. I had watched him promise clients things he couldn't deliver, overcharge for services, and drop partnerships the moment something better came along. His business practices weren't illegal, but they weren't exactly ethical either. And now I realized that many of his former partners and clients had been complaining to me about his behavior for years, probably because they saw me as the more trustworthy half of our partnership. The next morning, I called my lawyer and told him I wasn't signing anything until we did a complete audit of Trevor's finances. Then I did something that Trevor never saw coming. I started making phone calls to all the business contacts I had maintained over the years, not to gossip about my failing marriage, but to let them know I was starting my own consulting firm and would love to discuss how I could help them with their marketing and business development needs. The response was incredible. Within a week, I had meetings scheduled with 5 major companies who had been considering ending their contracts with Trevor anyway. They were tired of his arrogant attitude and his habit of overpromising and under-delivering. But they knew me as the person who actually followed through, who remembered their birthdays and their kids' names, who genuinely cared about their success rather than just seeing them as dollar signs. My first major client was a tech startup that Trevor had been courting for months. The CEO, a brilliant woman named Lauren, told me she had been planning to go with Trevor's company until she heard I was starting my own business. She said she had always felt more comfortable dealing with me than with Trevor, and she trusted my vision more than his flashy presentations that were all style and no substance. Within 3 months, I had signed contracts worth more than $2 million. Trevor's business started hemorrhaging clients as word spread through our network that I was offering the same services with better results and more personal attention. The man who thought I was just a pretty face who organized dinner parties was watching his empire crumble while mine was being built. But here's the thing that really made this whole situation beautiful. I wasn't trying to destroy Trevor out of spite or revenge. I was simply being myself and doing what I had always been good at, building genuine relationships and delivering excellent results. The clients were choosing me because I was better at the job, not because I was trying to sabotage my ex-husband. That made my success feel even sweeter. Crystal, Trevor's young girlfriend, started getting nervous when Trevor's lifestyle began to change. The expensive dinners became less frequent. The designer gifts stopped appearing. And suddenly, Trevor was stressed about money for the first time in years. She had fallen for the wealthy, confident man who could afford to spoil her, not the insecure guy who was watching his business fail. By the time our divorce was finalized, Crystal had already moved on to someone with a more stable bank account. Meanwhile, my company was exploding with growth. I had hired a team of talented people who shared my vision of ethical business practices and genuine customer service. We were featured in business magazines, and I was invited to speak at conferences about entrepreneurship and women in business. The same industry that had overlooked me when I was just Trevor King's wife was now celebrating me as one of the most innovative business leaders of the year. The moment I knew I had truly made it came about 18 months after Trevor had handed me those divorce papers. I was sitting in my new office, a beautiful space in downtown, with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the city, when my assistant told me Trevor was on the line. I almost didn't take the call, but curiosity got the better of me. His voice was different when he spoke to me. Gone was the arrogant confidence that had characterized our last conversations. Instead, he sounded tired, and maybe even a little desperate. He told me his company was struggling, and asked if there was any way we could work together, maybe refer clients to each other, or collaborate on projects. The man who had dismissed my contributions to his success was now asking for my help to save his failing business. I listened to his whole pitch, and when he was done, I told him something I had been waiting months to say. Trevor, I appreciate you reaching out, but I think our business philosophies are too different for a partnership to work. I wish you the best, but I'm focused on growing my own company right now. It was professional, it was polite, and it was final. I didn't need to be cruel or petty because my success spoke for itself. Today, 3 years after Trevor tried to throw me away like yesterday's garbage, my company is worth over $1 billion. We've expanded into 3 countries, and I employ more than 500 people who share my vision of building a business that actually makes the world a better place. I've been featured on magazine covers, invited to speak at universities, and recognized as one of the most influential entrepreneurs of my generation. But you know what the best part is? It's not the money or the recognition, or even the satisfaction of proving Trevor wrong. The best part is discovering who I really am when I'm not trying to be what someone else wants me to be. For 8 years, I had molded myself into Trevor's idea of the perfect wife, supporting his dreams while putting my own on the back burner. His betrayal forced me to find my own voice, my own strength, and my own path to success. I learned that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the catalyst for the best thing that ever happens to you. Trevor's betrayal didn't break me, it freed me. It freed me from a marriage where I wasn't truly valued, from a life where I was playing small, and from the fear that I couldn't make it on my own. Diamond's story proves that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the best thing that ever happened to you. If this story inspired you to never let anyone dim your light, smash that like button and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe and hit the bell, because I've got more stories of incredible women who turn their pain into power. What's your comeback story? Drop it in the comments below. I read every single one. Remember, queens don't compete with peasants, they build empires. Until next time, keep rising.